My name is Christina Langdon. I am a high performance coach to visionary leaders, and I'm also the author of the book For Success' Sake. I worked for Martha Stewart along with Ron. I was there for about 20 years, where I helped her launch more than 20 of her media brands from the core brand. I was the associate publisher of Martha Stewart Living for many years, and I was the publisher of Everyday Food and the publisher of Body and Soul. My last role was working as the CRO at Fast Company, where I took the brand that was losing money to profitability in just 2 years. I recently published a book. It's called For Success' Sake, which combines all of me and all that I've learned to help others create success on their own terms. The book and what I talk about is for anyone who has an itch for more and is motivated to create new possibilities for their life and their business. For Success' Sake is for the reader who wants to do the work to gain clarity, define what success means to them, and get motivated. It's an easy read and something I feel passionate about, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with Ron about.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is this CEO series where we bring together global leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, and innovators. I don't need to read the bio today because that was awesome. When you read the piece about the Martha Stewart thing, we're both alums from Martha, and I said, wow, that was cool. So welcome.
Hi, Ron. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. We have known each other for a long time. We both started around, I think I started around 2000. You started somewhere around there. I was there for 9 years. You were there a little longer.
19
years. Okay. Wow. That's cool. So you know what? I always like to start the program to try and understand where you are today. And then you think about where you started from, maybe from university, and how did it get to the point that you become an author of a best-selling book, a CEO coach, board coach, all those kinds of things. That was a lot of maneuvering to get to that point. Walk us through a short version of that.
Well, I will, because I feel like, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of detours, there's a lot of roadblocks, there's a lot of challenges along the way. As I figured out where I am today, and that is I coach visionary leaders and CEOs. And I've been doing that for 4 years after 30 years of working in the media business. And as you said, I work for Martha Stewart, I work for brands like Fast Company. And when I reached the C-suite, when I became the chief revenue officer at Fast Company, I was hearing these whispers and nudges that I was really wanting to do more or do something different. But at that point, I was sort of living by the expectations that others had for me. And I also was living for expectations that I had for myself. So if you looked at my CV or my LinkedIn profile, you might say I was, quote unquote, perfect on paper, when in fact I was really perfectly miserable.
Yeah.
I had to get to a reconciliation of that misery and had to do the work on what made me happy. I had I had the back half of my life to live, and I wanted to live more joyfully with ease and more impact. Well, what did that mean? So I really dove in and looked at what was my sort of secret sauce? What did I love doing? And then I decided I would do more of that. And that's when I opened up my coaching business.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing because, you specifically in the era of social media, perfect on paper, but I'm miserable.
Perfectly miserable.
Oh.
So when you think about social media, it's a part of our life. It's a part of our culture. And you also know social influencers, right? We look to people to influence us. And so one of the things I had to do for myself that I now work with others on, and it's in my book, For Success' Sake, is that you are the biggest influencer in your life. And when you recognize your influence over you, it's a game changer. So instead of offloading our power to others' influence, we need to start with ourselves to lead ourselves first for the impact that we want to have.
Hmm. You know, one of the key points from my side in these shows that we do on the CEO series is therapeutic, because so many points that you touch on, everybody for the most part goes through some of this. You know, the biggest you are the biggest influencer.
Mhm.
People struggle sometime to get there. You know, you coach people and you're seeing great things, but they may not be seeing that. How do you guide someone who's maybe stuck?
I talk to a lot of people who do get stuck, and they get stuck in their own thoughts. When you think about success, the Cambridge Institute of Technology did a whole research study on what are the components of success. And they said there were three. One is skill, one is environment, and the other is psychology, which is mindset. And when you dig into the research a little bit further, it shows a staggering amount. 87% of success is driven by mindset.
Mm,
And when we go through school and even in our careers, we're not taught to manage our minds. We're not taught to listen to our thoughts. We're not taught to mind our own mind. So when people are stuck, it's typically from the thoughts that they're having. So what we do is we uncover those thoughts. I mean, I have a newsletter. It's called the Sunday Sunshine, and I wrote this past week about me, the bully. I am a bully to myself. When I think about my first thoughts out of my head every morning and I write them on paper, I am awful to myself. And so I want to work every day to be my are you laughing? I want to work to my every day to be more of a good friend to myself and not the bully. So people who are stuck, they are definite bullies to themselves. I can imagine what's going inside of their head.
mind our own minds.
Mm,
So how do you how if a person is stuck? So my routine for that is walking, just
yeah.
going out and walking and just embracing the environment.
I'm sort of driven by constantly questioning myself. So on my walks, I am questioning who I'm becoming.
Ooh,
Who do I want to become? And so when you think about people who are stuck or challenged or feeling like they've hit another detour, part of what I work on with them is who are they becoming? Who do they want to become? And oftentimes people say, I don't know. And I don't know, that's just a dream killer. That's the brain playing and doing a number on us. So when we get stuck, we're typically making decisions out of fear or making decisions out of lack. And that decision making comes from the smallest part of our brain.
mm,
Biggest part of our brain sits up here. It's the prefrontal cortex, and it tells us that's where imagination sits. We're the only species who has imagination, right? So that's why you don't see dogs and horses or cats sending a man to the moon, right? So when we are making decisions for ourselves and making it from imagination, and imagination is simply asking, what if? Why not?
yeah.
What's possible? So when you think about becoming and who you're becoming, who do I want to become? Like when you want to be a marathon runner, before you've run that marathon, crossed the 26.2 miles, you've put your application in and it's been accepted, but you're not a marathon runner yet, but you are a marathon runner because you've committed to it. You've invested in it. You've made the choice to send in the application. And then you start making decisions from that marathon runner's mind. I've
Mhm.
got to see how many shoes do I need? What kind of running shoes? What's the running plan? When I'm halfway along, what decisions will I have to make because of the weather? How do I want to eat? How do I want to feed myself? You are becoming a marathon runner before you've even become it.
Mm. And there's a whole ecosystem that goes along with that, because the marathon runner, using that metaphor, is the so-called future state.
Yeah.
But here are the steps I have to go through. So here's what I find, amazing when I talk to leaders. They can understand the strategic side from business. They
Mhm.
understand the current state, future state. But then when it comes to their lives, lots of times they don't apply the same learnings from a personal side to do that.
Yeah, we're not taught to do that. We're taught to reach the goal, to set the strategy, execute the tactics, and get to the goal, right? That's how we are raised in the corporate culture to lead ourselves when we really have to lead ourselves first. So what outcomes are we generating for ourselves? And what outcomes will then we take to create the outcomes that we want in those goals?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do an auditing process. I offer an auditing process with my clients every day, thinking about 10 minutes a day. We train, right? We train for marathons, we train on the Peloton, we try to beat our best, all of these things. I ask clients to train their brain 10 minutes a day.
Okay.
And it's a simple process. It's an auditing process. What worked, what didn't work, what will I do differently from yesterday? Just reflect on yesterday as a leader. What worked, what didn't work, and what will I do differently? And then today, who do I want to become today? And how will I know I've achieved it when I'm there? How will I feel? How will my people feel? So, minding your mind
Yeah.
and creating a deliberate, intentional, and consistent practice. Oh my goodness. In 10 minutes a day, you can transform your whole life.
Wow. You threw me for a loop there when I started laughing because of the fact that I teach a course on consulting, and one of the things we always talk about is that you always stop and you take a look to see what worked, what didn't work, what can we do differently. And it's called the three W's concept.
Mhm.
Three W's concept is the same thing you're talking about. So if you look back on even if you did the cadence once a week, just say, what did I accomplish this week? What can I do differently for the next week? And you walk through that process. This is what the 10 minutes is about, correct?
Yes, exactly. I call it the three A's: the act, adapt, the audit, act, the audit, adapt, and act. Ooh, got it backwards.
That's okay.
But it's about being intentional instead of the to-do list, instead of I've got to reach my goal out of hustle. We all hustle, right? We've all hustled in our lives, but hustle doesn't produce the results that we ultimately want because we're producing them out of hustle. When you stop and slow down and get really intentional about what you want to create, yes, you want to reach your goals, but how do you want to feel? How do you want to create an environment where other people are feeling what you feel? Because that's a whole lot better reaching your goals from that perspective.
I call that, I just wrote here, hustle without intention. We also, people, you talk to people, busy, busy, busy. So what did you accomplish? What are you trying to
Yep.
do? I'm just busy, busy, busy. So I'm doing the steps that I'm thinking is going to get me here, but it has no alignment.
But let's say you're in hustle, right? And you get to your goal. Well, I got to the goal, so hustle worked. But how do you feel? You talked about leaders who get stuck. That's how they get stuck.
Hmm.
Right? That's what brings the, oh my gosh, do I have to hustle again to get to the goal?
Yeah.
We can get to our goals and feel more ease, joy, and impact.
So when you think about how, I always like to start with talking about the journey as to where you are today. When did this all kind of come into? I got something here, and I want to build something beyond here because I'm seeing something here.
You know, we both work for Martha Stewart. One of the things that she said to me
Hey, Martha,
early,
if you're listening.
one of the things she said to me early on my career, and I've written about it a lot, she told me to learn something new every day and go teach it to somebody else.
Uh,
And I joke often, like when we were at the 42nd Street office of Martha Stewart living on Media, I've joked that on any given lunch hour, you could find me on 46th Street in the Barnes and Noble in the self-help aisle. Like when I was an early manager, I was a young manager at that time. And I had a lot of people that I was managing and I wasn't sure how to manage. So I would go up to the Barnes and Noble and read every sort of leadership book I could get my hands on. So I was constantly learning around business leadership, around personal development. And so early in my career, when I look back at the red threads throughout my career, it was that business leadership and that personal development study that I did early on that sort of came with me along the way and I used. And so when I think about talked about being perfect on paper and perfectly miserable. When I started auditing my misery, if you will, I looked for the red threads and I saw that that personal development, that executive leadership training was something that really was when I was in flow and really lit me up. I just had to let go of people's expectation of me that I'm supposed to be the C-suite person in the media business. I had to let go of that expectation. I had to let go of thinking that if I started my own journey, that I could be successful doing that.
Hmm.
I had to embrace it and say that fear of growth, new beginnings was worth it.
There's so many flashbacks because I know the Barnes and Noble, and
Yeah,
my gym was around the corner. So my lunchtime was going to the gym, and then sometimes I stopped in the Barnes and Noble. So
you could have
cool.
seen me on the floor reading.
Yeah, we're cool, as it relates to that. But here's a challenge I have because we kind of do the same kind of work. So we talk about leadership and leadership coaches and all those kinds of things. But I say start younger.
Mhm.
You said you would go to Barnes and Noble and read books on self-help, how to become a better leader, all those kinds of things. But what about the manager who never would have thought of that? And how can organizations start developing leaders at a younger age who may have been put into a position, leave Friday and come in on Monday? You're managing a team of people, different skill set. What's an organization responsibility so that I don't want to say that so that we don't have to do a lot of work on our end? Can we start developing leaders at a younger age to because maybe that's not a Barnes and Noble. I use it as a metaphor. Maybe there's not a Barnes and Noble nearby.
I think that that's a really, really good question. What is the responsibility of corporations now to inspire young workers to become leaders? And I think we live in a day and age where it is our personal responsibility.
Okay.
Our growth is our personal responsibility. But I also believe that companies can foster environments where learning becomes a practice,
Mm.
where we're bringing in different perspectives, different thought, different ideas, different inspirations as a consideration that we can all grow from and learn from. So if the organization has a culture that is a culture that's fostering learning, whether it's technology or learning culture or learning tech, any other thing within the work world, it's really about saying, what have you learned today? What are you learning? What new perspectives can you bring in? And also, I would say, and what are you doing to personally develop yourself?
Yeah.
Like, what do you need? I mean, oftentimes we don't even ask our young leaders, who do you want to be in a year? It's okay if you don't want to work for me, right? It's okay. You want to do something different, that's great. Who do you want to become and how can I help you become that person?
Before this call, I got off a call with a client in Saudi Arabia, and we had the same discussion on building a learning culture inside of an organization.
Mhm.
So everything is always focused here, but how can we start building that in? And it's the same thing that you talk about. Who do you want to be when you grow up? And when you were a kid, people would ask you, who do you want to be when you grow up? Somebody would say a fireman, I want to be a policeman, all these kinds of things. And I often wonder, could we track that to see how that worked out?
Yeah.
Because how many people do you, and this is what I used on the call, how many people that go to school to become a lawyer because they come from a family of lawyers and they work 1 year and they say, I can't do this anymore. This is not what I want.
Yeah. I mean, I feel if we can start earlier in organizations fostering a learning culture,
Yeah.
then it will be normal. It will normalize it. What's interesting when you think about leaders who have been in the workforce for a long time, this whole personal development, this whole, what have you learned about yourself today? It just feels kind of a little bit uncomfortable for them. John Maxwell, influencer, leadership guru, right? He once said that he would go into his talks and he would ask people, when you were a young child, did you have a dream? And that, everybody's hand would go up. right? And then he would say, how many of you are working towards that dream? And fewer hands would go up.
Yeah.
And then he would ask, how many of you are living your dream? And very more often than not, nobody would raise their hand.
Right.
So we have to dream. We have to, and we have to, part of that dreaming is being okay with becoming who we want to become. It's learning, it's fostering, it's being curious and working for organizations. And even when those organizations aren't fostering it, asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Employees ask a lot more now than they did, I think, just a few years ago. And that's a good thing. What do your employees need? What are they saying they need? What they're saying they need helps create the psychological safety that people need when they're working in organizations. One of the things I ask leaders are, do you ask your people how it feels to work in the organization? Because when you ask them if they feel, and if they'll be honest with you, you can tell automatically whether they feel safe in that organization. And if they don't feel safe in the organization, they're going to leave.
They're gonna leave. Yeah. And it's that's so simple, but it appears that sometimes leadership, and this is what I say, if you start earlier, they can understand the concepts you're talking about. But all of a sudden, I arrive at the C-suite of -1, and I've never given time to reflect on the type questions you're talking about.
Yeah, I have a whole list of questions on my website for CEOs. It's called like the CEO assessment. I think that, again, on that treadmill of getting to our goals, on that treadmill of trying to succeed, sometimes we forget and we lose perspective around what is the real goal, because the goal is the end destination, right? But as I said before about the hustle, if you get there in the hustle, you feel stuck, you feel burnt out. We hear a lot about burnout.
Yeah.
But when you get there by thoughtfully embracing, who do I want to become? Who do I want my people to become? Am I leading with understanding? Leading is not telling, right?
Yeah.
Leading is influencing. How do we lead with influence? A lot of it is listening. Are we listening for understanding? And it's also like leading is not, influencing is not knowing. Oftentimes our people don't know. We haven't told them. We haven't set them up for success.
Mm-hmm.
What do my people need to know? Yes, they need to know that this is the goal, but they also need to know what's at risk. What's the opportunity? Where do I go when I when I'm challenged? And what does success look like as I'm trying to reach my goal?
Listen to you talk is like I'm laying on the couch. I teach it to business schools, as an adjunct. And one of the things I tell students is that you have to spend time thinking about you. And you talked about this in when we first started out this morning. Where do you want to be? Why is that? How can you make adjustments? You're going to have detours, you're going to have U-turns, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay if you have this. And I think and this is my thought, and you probably have a better insight than I do, is that reflection is good.
Mm-hmm.
Reflection says that it's okay because you still got years and years to go, and you can turn it around.
Well, with every crisis, there's a solution.
Yeah.
With every crisis, there is a solution. It really comes from finding the thought of that solution. We can stay in crisis and stay in the thoughts of failure, the thoughts of doubt, the thoughts of anxiety, the thoughts of burnout, the thoughts of busy. Busy is like my least favorite word. Or we can create the thoughts of, okay, what's the evidence? What are the circumstances? And what do I want to make them mean about me? Oftentimes in jobs, let's say when we are burnt out, or let's say we haven't reached our goal, we make that mean something about our self-worth. Mm-hmm. Missing a goal, missing, having a major hiccup or detour within your career, that means nothing about your self-worth. We make it mean something about us. And what we have to do is sort of reflect, as you said, what has worked, what didn't work, what will I do differently? Because that's where the growth lies. What will you do differently? And then start today to create the future you want to become.
Mm. So initially, when you did your intro, you talked about who you have become over the years. When did that kind of settle in to say, you know what, I'm onto something here, and I want to take that, repackage it, and try and help people over the humps that I've gone through?
So part of my story is that I finally decided that I was deserving of something different, deserving of something more. And I was going to take a bet on me, myself, and my becoming. And I did my first workshop. It was a morning session with a group of 8 very wonderfully accomplished women. And the workshop was called Living Your Extraordinary Life. At the end of the workshop, I remember one of the gals in the workshop came up to me and said, that was life changing. And I said, I'm so glad you feel that way, because can you tell I don't feel well? I didn't feel well. I took a blood test that day. And 2 days later, April Fool's Day 2019, the results came back and I was diagnosed with AML leukemia.
Ah,
I was put in the hospital that same day for the first, I think my first stint was about 36 nights in the hospital, but I was in treatment for over a year. And I remember that I was feeling very robbed. I finally decided. I finally gave myself permission. I finally felt like I was deserving of something more, and I was making it happen. And I felt like I was like, you can't rob me of this. Like, and I went through all the things that you might imagine, like this isn't fair, and am I going to survive, and all of the things. And so I decided I was going to really launch my company, and I was going to be a success from my hospital bed.
wow.
Now, I'm not saying that to pound my chest and say how great I am. I
Yeah.
did it as a survival tactic. I talk about the year of treatment. I reflect on the year of treatment as being post-traumatic growth. I wrote a book in the hospital, not the book that I've recently published, because the other one's a little more personal. I'm not ready to publish that one yet, but you can
Yeah.
expect to see it. But I put myself back into school, because when you are being treated, you're very inside, and you're in the hospital room. And I got my computer. I can go back to school. So I put myself back into school. And the more I chose this survival tactic, if you will, the more convinced I was that there was so much more ahead of me. There was so much to survive for. And that I was going to define what success looked like for me. Success, as we know, is not material. It's not money.
Yeah.
It's not all the things. Success for me, which I defined, was successful, FUL, full of joy, ease, and impact. That's what I've mentioned a couple times. That's my definition. And my definition has gone even deeper. I defined what joy meant to me, how I would know when I have it, what would I be doing when I was doing it. I defined ease. What does ease mean to me? And what does impact mean for me? And that was so much fun. And imagining who I would become when I was creating impact. And I think it was that work that I did that helped me through my year of treatment.
Mm. Facing that diagnostic, with leukemia. Oh my God, I couldn't. And having that conversation, but you were able to take what a lot of folks would have considered the end of the world. It's over, but you were able to flip that. What drove that? Because I read an article one time that said we're one phone call or one email away from
Mhm.
our lives being disrupted. And so some people would have gotten that same diagnostic, and they would have gone off the deep end. You took that I'm going to say repackaged it and said, you know what? I'm going to use this as a stepping stone, launching pad, and I'm going to propel.
I wanted to survive. So I think it really was more survival than anything else.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I want to share is that I've had several health issues throughout my life.
Hmm.
And every time I've had them, It's been at a crossroad. It's been when I was under stress that I wasn't managing. So one of the things I want to offer is don't wait for a health crisis, be it burnout, be it stress, be
Yeah.
it something that happens because of stress. Don't allow stress. Like I want to help people prevent what's preventable. And it goes back to the mind and managing our minds, being the minder of your mind. And if I think that if I had managed my mind, now I might have gotten leukemia. They don't know why AML leukemia presents itself, but I do know it was a time of stress for myself. So I have committed to managing my mind, to even on the most stressful days, see my way through.
You know, you are a marketer at heart, minder of
Yeah.
my mind.
I am a marketer at heart. That's Martha Stewart,
Oh
right?
my God, minder of my mind. You could tag that and you could build a whole program under that, concept of that. So how do you stay focused? I mean, so you're coaching people to get better at what they do.
Mhm.
What happens when Christina runs into a rough patch?
And I do. I mean,
We all
there are high value cycles and low value cycles. Here's what I work though. Like even though when I get into a low value cycle, what I think the practices that I work with my clients as well as myself is that even when we go into a low value cycle, that because working on the tools, we can reset and recharge quicker.
Mhm.
So when I'm in my low value cycles, going back to being the marketer, I mind my mind. What is it saying? What is
Mhm.
it telling me? What is it offering me? But I'm really good now at looking at the facts. So when people say nothing's working, I should be farther along. I use that word should. When people are in the moment, I call them these negative thought cyclones. When they go there, I have them look for the evidence. Well, what is the evidence of your success? What is the evidence that things aren't like what's working? Like one of the things I try to do differently with my clients every day is to say, what's working? We start there because when we start there, we're in the prefrontal cortex, we're in that imagination because we're in what's working, right? So I have to go back to the facts of my life. Well, what's working? What is like, I don't want to say it's a gratitude practice. I want you to find real evidence. How many clients do I have? How many lives have I changed? How many books am I writing? How many pieces of IP have I put out? Like, I go back and I want to find all of the evidence. Like, I was reflecting on this just a couple of weeks ago in a low value cycle and saying nothing's changed over the last year for me. And then, of course, I said, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to look for the data. I went back and looked for the data, and it was, if I hadn't have done the practice, I wouldn't have seen it.
Yeah.
So you got to go there. What is working?
Yeah.
And then look to see if you can intentionally create new thoughts from what's working instead of the thought cyclone of what isn't working.
Okay. Okay, cool. We're going to take a commercial break now. We're a little over, and we'll come right back.
Do you have an all-star HR team? You may feel your team is already performing at a high level, but let's take a closer look. Would your company's top leaders and employees agree that your HR team are operating at a high level? Are team members able to influence top executives on difficult topics? Are team members' business and strategy focused on the challenges the organization is facing? Does the executive team trust your direct reports as advisors on human capital issues? If you can answer yes to these questions, you have built an outstanding team. If you feel there is room for improvement, Strategy Focused Group can create a custom development program to elevate the quality of your HR team. We use HCI certification programs as well as non-certified HRBP MBA masterclass to give your team a laser focus on the business and strategy. Please email us at info@strategyfocusedgroup.com.
I want to thank you for our discussion. We still have time, but I was thinking over the commercial break of I didn't do my walk this morning because I had calls as soon as I got up. But this was me laying on the couch, although I'm sitting in a chair, because so many things you talked about, and this what's working piece was just phenomenal because I use that a lot, but I have never heard in the context of looking when you talk through your story of being diagnosed or the business is not where it should be, and you went and looked that back to see what that was to verify that and move forward. That diagnostic piece
Mm-hmm.
is so cool for people that are stuck,
Mm-hmm.
people that are not able to figure out what that next step would be. So I want to say just to you, thank you for my couch session this morning. And although I'm sitting here in a chair,
I feel like I'm on a walk with you.
yeah, well, we're here together, so I need to we got to have to do some other sessions beyond this. So, tell me about the important influences in your life who have shaped you, shaped whom you become as a leader today. So, we talked about the Martha Stewart angle, and I'm going to send Martha a link to the session today. Tell us about important influences for Christina.
Well, I think as you're going to send it to her, I'll focus on Martha, but that's not true. I was going to say this before you even sent that. 19 years I worked for Martha Stewart, and I started when I was 26 years old. She was a great influence in my life and who I've become. And a lot of like when people, I care very deeply what people say about me when I leave the room. So
Mm,
the brand of me is important in that way.
yeah.
And when I started at Martha Stewart, 26 years old, I was back in the advertising wing, if you will. And all of my colleagues had gone out to lunch. So no one was there but me. It was my first week, and they'd given me something to do that I was working on. And I was inside an office, and I heard Martha walk into this advertising wing. And out on this table were a bunch of advertising premiums and gifts, and they were out on a table. And she was looking at them and making a bunch of comments about them. And I'll just be negative comments that this doesn't represent my brand. This is not the Martha Stewart brand. This doesn't look like me. And she called out, is anybody here? And I was there first week on the job. She said, did you put these things together? And I was like, oh, no, first week on the job. And after a brief discussion, she said to me, you will learn my brand. You will learn what I stand for. You will learn what quality means. You will understand my expectation for what anything should look like when it goes out of this office. And I got a call from Martha's assistant a couple of weeks later saying that Martha had wanted me to follow an editor, had wanted me to go along to the farmer's market with an editor for a photo shoot. And I had to go into my boss and be like, I don't know, I got this phone call, I'm supposed to go. And so was fortunate enough, I call it the Martha University. I was fortunate enough that along the way, over that next year, I got called into learning about what the components were, what the values of the brand were from the editorial side. And I call it Martha University, and I call it for myself because I learned when somebody sets expectations so high for themselves and their brand, who do I want to be? I want to be somebody who sets expectations for their own personal brand. So that was a enormous influence in my life.
Mm, mm. I mentioned the marketing angle, Martha University. Oh, yeah, it was a learning experience and I'll know at this stage of the game I'll never experience that ever again. But that's exactly what it was. So when you think back to your career, the other question I wanted to ask you, what was the most important leadership lesson? Now I know that probably could have been one. What was an important leadership lesson or some kind of an angle from there that you said, you know what, I still reflect back to that particular point?
I am the biggest advocate, right? When I said earlier, you're the biggest influencer in your life, I learned that late. I feel like I learned it late. I wish I'd learned it earlier.
Yeah.
I remember months before I left Martha Stewart Living on the Media, a new CEO had come in, executive vice president of advertising and marketing came in. And I was next in that role. So when my boss left at the time, I assumed, we know the first three letters, right? I assumed I'd get the job. I'd been there 19 years. And
don't even stop me with that one, but go ahead.
The biggest leadership lesson I learned was several years later. I was reflecting on this story with a woman who I admire a lot. And she told me, "You never asked for the job." And I was like, "What?" And I didn't. I was expecting, I assumed, I never asked for the job. So I think that was probably a new chapter for me when I realized that I'm a hard worker. I always worked hard, right? The hard work is never the hard work. The hard work is really the work that we do on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I will always be that advocate for myself going forward. I'm going to ask for what I want.
That's another discussion at another time, because you hit a lot of points there. So let's go back to young people in schools. And I talked about, my little sessions that I do at a couple of schools, one in Dubai, one in India. What advice would you give if you had to give the commencement speech to bright-eyed, the future is here, I'm going to do all these amazing things? What would be a key lesson that you would tell that group of people?
I have 3 kids of my own, and I want to,
I'm a twin too. You mentioned twins. I'm a twin.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Boy, girl, 2 boys.
Boy. Fraternal twins. But my twin died, but that's another story.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. My heart goes out to you because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember, so my daughter was a competitive athlete in college, and her team went to the national championships 3 years in a row. And about a year after her team graduated and got jobs and were in the workforce, I did a little workshop for them. It was the Brand of You workshop that I give at times. And when I asked them what their biggest struggles were, almost all of them said their biggest struggle was with confidence. And no matter how accomplished I am working with these visionary leaders and CEOs that I'm blessed to work with, everybody struggles with confidence.
That's right.
And I want to answer this in 2 different ways. The Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a study that says the least capable people are more confident. And the capable, smart, skilled people are the least confident. So what I would offer young people today is when self-doubt creeps in, when imposter syndrome creeps in, when our confidence is waning, that if you could see it as a beacon, as that sort of lighthouse for you to go towards, because oftentimes our moments of greatest growth are just on the other side of fear. So fear is a good thing. Self-doubt is a good thing when we see it as sort of a magnet for us and see it for what it is. But it also means that we have to recognize it for what it is. We have to think about why am I doubting myself? What am I afraid of? What should I be thinking? I use the word should again, and I don't like that word. But it's really getting an understanding. And I think once we do get an understanding, and once we know that most everybody, 73% of us, experience self-doubt, this is everybody. We are no different than anybody else. And I remember, I just want to tell one quick story so I go into the emergency room the night I am diagnosed with AML leukemia. And all of these doctors and nurses are coming in, and they're asking me the same questions over and over and over again. And then Dr. Park walked in, and I was in the emergency room at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Dr. Park asked me the same questions that all the other doctors and nurses asked me. And my family was surrounded, and my best friends were surrounding me, and their whites in their eyes were really telling me exactly how I was feeling, right? Like, and he said to me, "You do not come to Memorial Sloan Kettering to be treated. You come to Memorial Sloan Kettering to be cured."
Whoa.
And in that moment, I was like, game on, with maybe some swear words, right? I was like, game on. It was a life-saving thought for me. But did I want Dr. Park to be confident, or did I want him to be competent?
Okay.
So people often say, you want him to be confident. No, I wanted him to be competent. I wanted him to know what chemicals he was going to mix for me that were going to cure me. And that comes from skills and capabilities. And him knowing his skills and capabilities allowed him to be confident.
Yes.
So the young people, work on your skills, work on your capabilities, work on your mindset, because those are the things that will help you become confident.
Yeah. And the call I had this morning with this particular client, and all that came into play, and they were going through all of these kind of things. I said, stop for a second. Let's just go back. It's not all that, and kind of walk them through that. And I could see the kind of light going off in their head, that they had basically overthought the entire situation. It's not going to be all that. This can be done. Let's just calm down and let's have a more rational discussion, because you've reached a lot of conclusions that you don't have fact to back it up. There's no evidence base behind this. So that's a pretty cool concept, because that scenario, when you think of someone telling you something that could be life threatening, but even the point of being in a mindset to begin thinking it through logically from your stage of laying there on that bed or whatever it was, that had to be powerful.
It was powerful upon reflection. Like, I know now, but when he said it, I felt like, okay,
yeah,
I got this. We're going to get this together.
Okay, cool. So last question. How do you stay focused? I mean, you do a session and you're there all day, and at the end of the day, you're walking out, and maybe you're here, or maybe you're here on the scale, our so-called Richter scale. How do you stay focused? What does Christina do to energize or re-energize, or whichever way you want to put it in context?
That's a really good question. How do I stay focused? Because sometimes I don't think I'm focused.
Yeah.
I think it's that morning routine that I have where I do the audit, right? I do what worked, what didn't work, what will I do differently? And I want to set my days up for success. So I really define ahead of time, like, what will I have done today if I'm successful, and how will I feel? But I also think that focus for me comes from creative thinking. And I feel like we've got to be learning. You have to learn something. Like, I get energy and focus from learning. So I'm a consummate learner.
Yeah.
I want to learn from other people. I want to see things differently. I mean, one of the things that people say about me is that I have the ability to see what other people can't see. And I have the ability to see what people can see, but I help them see it more clearly. And that is, I think it comes from my passion for learning different perspectives and seeing things differently. When we get into routines, oftentimes that's when my energy wanes, where I lose my focus. Yeah. I want to kind of mix it up to help regain my focus, because focus is hard. But I also have a motto that we have to be intentional, we have to be deliberate, and we have to be consistent, particularly with minding our mind.
Again, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show.
Oh my goodness.
You know what? My routine is steps. 10,000 is my goal, but today I probably did 50,000 steps.
That's fabulous.
50,000. I have so many nuggets that I've written here that I'm going to go back and read through the notes, because I'm a prolific note taker when I have these conversations, but there were so many key points that that you've put in place for me. And it was just amazing. I know we're over time, but I just want to go into one key point, and because my mother's favorite saying was shoulda, coulda, woulda, stop it. And I remember reading through your bio, and you mentioned that concept of I should have done, I could have done,
Coulda, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
shoulda, woulda, coulda. Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with the shoulda, woulda,
Give
coulda.
me a should. Give me a shoulda. Give me a shoulda. Give me a short version of that before we close that, because we have about 2 more minutes before we close.
Well, like for me to take this like bold step in having this new career, I had to get out of the shoulda, the woulda, and the coulda. So should, I've learned, is really, I think from Brené Brown, should is shame in disguise. And so when we're sitting in the thoughts of shame, when we're sitting in the thoughts of our past, then we're standing still, like we're not moving forward. We have the ability to change how we think about our past every single day. We can reframe it, we can recontextualize it, but not from a shoulda, woulda, coulda, but from a what do I want to be doing?
Yeah.
What do I want to learn from something I've done to help me create my future? So I really try. I've said should twice on this episode,
Okay.
but I really try to banish the shoulda, woulda, couldas. I am only looking at my past and what I even did yesterday from the lens of how can I learn from it? Because like it's the thought there is that I'm either winning or I'm learning. I'm not winning and failing. I'm winning or I'm learning.
Okay, cool. Christina, thank you so much. As we close out, hang on as we do the official closeout, but thank you so much for being a guest, and thank you for the 50,000 steps this morning.
Well, and I'm going to go take a walk now, but thank you for having me on, and it's so nice to see you again.
Okay, cool. Hang on. We'll talk afterwards.
Okay, great.